Media goes for angles that are perhaps very exciting or titillating or whatever that's going to draw an audience, but it doesn't necessarily represent the truth. By having the face-to-face, one-on-one with people, you start to discover what these cultures really are. But you have the greater amount of the population that want to live together and they want to love life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today we have a very special guest, John A. Kuri. John, I'm so happy to meet you again. Thank you so much for sitting down with us today for this amazing interview. I'm very happy to see you. And for our viewers that don't know John, John is an Emmy-nominated American producer, screenwriter, director, author, and production designer, whose career spans more than 5 decades. He is the son of 2-time Oscar-winning set decorator Emile Kuri, and he began his professional journey at Walt Disney Studios and Disneyland, working in the design and production of films and television, as well as the theme park operations and development. With over 145 screen credits, John Kuri's work ranges from major studio films and television to internationally recognized documentaries, historical novels, and cross-cultural projects that bridge continents. From Native American history to China, Mongolia, Sudan, and global environmental advocacy. John, we're so happy to have you here with us. This is quite an impressive list of things that you have done in your lifetime. And maybe I can jump right into the first question. Throughout your career as a producer, writer, director, and author, one striking connection is your deep engagement with cultures far beyond your own.
First of all, Olga, it's wonderful to be here, and I'm very honored that you wanted to talk to me. This interest that I have probably stems from my childhood, being Lebanese in part. My father was Lebanese. His parents had immigrated from Lebanon to Mexico. My dad was born in Mexico, so I also was exposed to the Latin American culture that Mexico represents. And then the American culture. My mother was second generation Los Angeles born. However, she was Scottish, and she was French, and she was Austrian. So I had this wonderful mixture of culture as a child that I was exposed to. And growing up in that, I loved all of that. And my dad also encouraged travel, and he took us places. So I was seeing things as a child that really inspired me. Images that remain very strong in my mind today that go all the way back to when I was 7 years old. So I think it's just kind of a natural outgrowth.
Was it shaped early in your life, or did it grow organically throughout your work in film and storytelling?
Well, I didn't start out in film thinking, oh, gee, I want to be a filmmaker. It was an opportunity. At 16 years of age, I was able to go to work for one of the concession companies at Disneyland. I started out making pizzas, and then I became a fry cook. And when I finally turned 18, I was old enough to be hired by the Disney company, and I worked there as a ride operator. At that time, it was about spending money and being able to take pretty women out for dates and, live a life and have social fun. However, I got married young, started having children, and I needed to get serious about future. The Disney company afforded me wonderful opportunity, and I developed with the theme parks in that there became an opportunity in the film industry because it got very busy one summer to the point where the labor unions couldn't fill the requirements, and so they were hiring off the street. And my dad called me and said, there's an opportunity here for you if you can take a vacation from Disneyland and your executive duties there, come to work at the studio. We can get you on the swing gang, which is the labor in the property department. And I started there. Then I started to see how films got made, and I got very interested, and then I got hooked. And then I decided, this is what I want to do. I want to be a filmmaker. But I thought it was going to be contained in the world of design. At Disney Studios, I served my apprenticeship as an art director after I had become a decorator. And from that, I got very interested in learning visual effects and the matte photography, the yellow sodium process that was used so effectively with films like Mary Poppins. And I was just enthralled with all of that, and I kept growing. And then a wonderful man who was a director that had done several films there, who I'd done 4 pictures with, asked me to leave Disney and come with him to do a motion picture adaptation of John Steinbeck's The Red Pony. And when he told me that Henry Fonda and Maureen O'Hara and Ben Johnson and Jack Elam were going to be in this film, I thought, I have to go do this film. And then I really started on my trajectory. So that's how it all began.
That's very impressive. Not many people can say that. That's exciting. And you have worked closely with very different cultural traditions. For example, Cheyenne Rising Sun, which centered on the Northern Cheyenne people, and your collaboration with artists and filmmakers across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. What has close contact with these different cultures taught you about humanity?
Oh, so much. That's a subject all into its own documentary. I had this amazing experience where Dr. Art McDonald, who was an Oglala Sioux Indian, who was the president of the Morning Star Memorial Foundation, which celebrated the history of the Northern Cheyenne,
Mm-hmm.
he came to me after seeing one of my films and asked me, would I be interested in writing the history of the Northern Cheyenne? And I was absolutely taken aback by the question. And then he explained to me that their history was all oral, that it was not documented in writing. They had illustrations, they had picture books, so to speak, depicting certain moments in their history, but there was no writing of this history. And there were tribal members still very much with us that could speak to the points of history that were so important to be told. I was so honored, and I wrote that novel going up and traveling the trail. You know, that history of the Northern Cheyenne is phenomenal. And one day I want to see that turned into a motion picture. I've done an adaptation of it, and it'll be a painfully beautiful story. But there were surviving members, and that was really important. There's so many stories behind each project that I've done where you're talking about an international implication or traveling to some other area. I'm drawn to stories about humanity and people overcoming the extraordinary obstacles that can come up against life, and the visionary leaders who keep their families or their people, whatever the circumstance is, keeping them alive, keeping them moving, keeping them realizing that anything is attainable if you believe in it and you pursue it, and you can get to those goals. So I love doing stories that inspire.
Motivational stories.
Motivational, absolutely.
People overcoming something, absolutely. And do you see common threads, values, or ideas that unite us across geography and history?
Yes, I certainly do. I certainly do. The things I've experienced, my travels to the Middle East, working there, or my travels into Latin America, or frankly, going to Japan when I was doing research for the motion picture Captive Hearts that Pat Morita starred in. Pat and I were partners, and we wrote the screenplay together. And it required me to go to Japan and do a lot of research, and it was a beautiful experience to go into northern Japan, up into Yamagata Prefecture, the dead of winter, and see how these people were living. the conditions that they were facing, and the parallel in that current moment to the chapter of history that we were going to write about, which was World War II. And that story focused on two American pilots being captured because their plane gets shot down. They're captured by villagers. The villagers happen to live in an area in the mountains that is completely snow blocked from the rest of Japan. So they've got these two American soldiers that they must keep as prisoners until the snows melt. And the communication between the Americans and the Japanese gets to that point where we as an audience discover the citizens of that country were at the hands of their government, who got into a war, who attacked, and the people suffer because of decisions made. And the Americans there learn how beautiful these people are, and the result of it is this beautiful blending of cultures exposed to each other through the drama and tragedy of war.
So, John, your novel, Cheyenne Rising Sun, and its later screenplay adaptation focused on the Northern Cheyenne Nation and its intergenerational leadership. Why was it important for you to tell this story?
I learned so many things at that time. The common thoughts about problems with the Native Americans, these people, there was always conversation about alcohol, for example. And Dr. McDonald, who was a psychologist, he was a very highly honored psychologist, and he did an enormous amount of work with the tribal people, trying to help them overcome whatever issues. He said to me one day, I want you to understand why alcoholism is such an issue in our history. Back in the day, they made possession of alcohol illegal. And therefore, when someone who has suffered the pain of losing the land that they grew up on because of war, because of expansion of one culture versus the other, who suffers that pain, who's rejected by society, who is told you must live on a reservation in order to get the benefits that come from the reservation. If you take yourself off the reservation, live somewhere else, try to pursue life somewhere else, you're cut off from that support. That's a very painful existence. So what you're talking about is a 70% unemployment rate on these tribal lands. To medicate that pain, alcohol was one of the solutions. And since it was illegal to possess it, when they got their hands on a bottle, they would drink it. There wasn't a law against consumption, there was a law against possession. So you had a lot of circumstances where the American Indian was blistered out of their mind on alcohol because it medicated the pain. It also was something they couldn't possess. They would be arrested for it. So this was a self-perpetuating problem. And when you put that together with conditions on the reservation where they can't get the benefits of the reservation without living there, therefore they can't leave to go get jobs and try to integrate into the culture that is supposed to be accepting them. This is a horrible circumstance. This is a dead-end street. When you look at their history and you read about Carlisle, Pennsylvania, where so many of these young American Indians were sent for schooling to adapt to the American way, and everything is stripped away from them. These beautiful young women with their gorgeous braided hair, the hair being cut off immediately when they arrived at these schools, any clothing that represented anything to do with their culture and their ancestry burned. They're given Christian names. They were not allowed to speak the name that they were given at birth. These are terribly painful things. And they represent such a small constituency within the population of this country. Washington, D.C. does not pay attention to them. So to me, it was very important to recognize all that and to try to have a broad audience, whether American or wherever, understand why things were the way they were. And then who were the people who were trying to make the changes. There's some beautiful stories within all that, but
that is a very interesting topic, because that is the problem that we hear about a lot within Native Americans and so on.
yes.
So that's good. What responsibility do you feel when working with histories and voices that have often been marginalized and misrepresented in cinema?
Oh, I feel a tremendous responsibility for any writer who wants to tackle history. You have to present history in all of its truth. You cannot take history and present it from one vantage only. You have to give the complete picture so people can really understand the dynamics. Whether you're talking about the American Indian or whether you're talking about, as I was a moment ago, about the Japanese in World War II, what they ended up facing, or whether you're talking about present day Middle East, for example, with all the conflicts that we have all heard about. When I first went to the Middle East and I was asked as a media specialist to mentor people in that arena that were working as filmmakers or journalists or what have you, television hosts, and help them understand how they could weave inspirational story into their journalism. And I found myself being received by people from all these cultures that the American media would want you to believe hated us. That was not the experience. I was so embraced. I remember one of the conferences where maybe 200 Palestinians were there, and these people were lovely. They were embracing, they were thankful, appreciative of, hopeful. These are beautiful things to experience. These are things that people here in this country need to know about that media doesn't give them. Media goes for angles that are perhaps very exciting or titillating or whatever that's going to draw an audience, but it doesn't necessarily represent the truth. By having the face-to-face, one-on-one with people, you start to discover what these cultures really are. And then I would come back here and I would tell people here, very intelligent people, very educated people, about these beautiful experiences, and they would be shocked. So for me, making dramatic movies or comedic movies, whatever, that can possibly celebrate the truth is a way to bring that cultural information to this audience so they realize, oh, they're not all terrorists. There are mothers and fathers, and they're raising families, and they face all of the same kinds of issues that any human being faces, and they need to be understood and respected for what it is they're up against. You have all of the elements that are human, that they exist. So.
You know, you bring up a good point. We, for ALLATRA International Public Movement Volunteers, did a social survey. It was one of the biggest social surveys where we interviewed people from all over the world, asking them what kind of a world do they want to live in, where they're happy, what unites people in the world, what is that one universal grain. And regardless of what corner of the world you go to, regardless of who you ask, whether it's a politician, a businessman, a janitor, or school teacher, it doesn't matter. All people want the same thing. Like you said, they all have families. They all want to be respected. They all want to make sure their kids live in a safe world. They all want to make sure there is safety and so on. So we realize that all people are the same regardless of where they are in the world. So it's... I think, you know, the media shows us as different, but actually,
yes, they do. Mm-hmm. I want to add one magnificent thing that I saw that absolutely was breathtaking. I was in Lebanon. I had had a beautiful audience with the Patriarch of the Maronite Rite of the Roman Catholic Church, and I left that meeting and went to see the statue of Our Lady of Mount Lebanon, which she stands there, it's maybe 75-foot bronze. It's painted in the classic colors of the Madonna. She's standing over the Mediterranean. She's about 1,500 meters above the Mediterranean. Her arms are outstretched to Beirut. It's beautiful. And at the base of the statue, coming up to her feet, there's a spiral staircase. And the people come to pay their respects, make their novenas, whatever. They circle on those steps to come up to the base. I got out of the car and I looked. This is 2016. I look up. What do I see? 90% of the people were Muslim women wearing their burqas, coming to pray to this Christian symbol. And I turned to the man who drove me there and I said, "Could you explain that to me, please?" And he said, "She inspires so many people from so many cultures. They come here to pray to her." And I thought, my God, this is the most beautiful thing to see this. Where is the media? Why isn't the media covering this? Why doesn't the media show this to the world? These are the kind of things that make people wake up and realize that it's not all a bunch of terrorists running around trying to kill each other. Yes, in every country and every culture, you have extreme edges where you have behavior that is abhorrent. But you have the greater amount of the population that want to live together and they want to love life. And they have those elements that exist that inspire them. She inspires people. I saw the same thing when I was 7 years old. I've never forgotten the image. My father took us to Mexico City to see where he grew up. And he took us to the cathedral, Our Lady of Guadalupe. And I remember at 7 years of age standing, I'm maybe 50 yards away from the entrance into the cathedral, and I'm looking at these Mexican women coming in through the gates, getting on their knees and walking on their knees to the cathedral, 50 yards, and then walking on their knees down the aisleway to the altar to pray to her. 7 years of age, it just struck me. It was like amazing to see this, and I've never forgotten the image. When I then in 2016 saw that image I just described, it was like, oh my God, it's universal and it doesn't stop. And these are things that the human needs to believe in something besides ourselves, something greater than who we are, and to take inspiration from it. And it crosses cultures and it crosses the religious barriers. All the great religions ultimately teach the same things about life and respect for humanity. How beautiful it is to see this. And why cannot our media give us these stories? How much different would the world be?
A lot different.
Yeah.
John, what do you think unites all people in the world? You've seen so many cultures, so many religions. What do you think is that universal grain that unites all people?
Oh, love of family, absolutely. Love of neighbors, wanting a good quality of life for your children, to enjoy the benefits, the God-given benefits of the land, what it can give to you, and what you can give back to the people and making it better. I mean, that's just, it's a fundamental core matter. Yeah.
So John, in 2008, your meeting with China Film Group led you to propose a biopic about legendary volleyball player Lang Ping, later released as Leap, starring Gong Li. How did working between Hollywood and the Chinese film industry challenge or expand your understanding of storytelling across cultures?
It was very interesting how that all happened. I had remembered that she was this amazing character in the Olympics in Los Angeles. That team defeated, they won the gold, and it was Jenny Lang Ping, and she was called the Iron Hammer, as I recall. She had a spike that was unbelievable. I thought she was fascinating, and then I learned that she managed to do that while suffering from an internal problem. She was in a lot of pain, but she played anyway, and she played for her country. And that is an incredibly powerful thing. So what happened is a group of filmmakers or executives from the China Film Group came to Los Angeles to learn about how the Hollywood industry works. And I received a call from an associate of mine who asked me to go to a session where the vice chairman of the China Film Group was going to be present and to meet him. So I took an interpreter with me, although they had an interpreter there, but I had an interpreter, a friend who was from China, very fluent. She interpreted, and I met Chairman Zhao, and we talked through interpreters. Meeting happened at a soundstage, and I didn't think much of it afterwards. You know, it was very pleasant. I went home. I got a phone call about 2 hours later. Can you please come to the hotel and meet with the vice president again, or vice chairman? So I went back and met with him because I thought, this is interesting. And ultimately, he asked me if I had any stories that I wanted to tell about that. And I brought up the subject of Jenny Lang Ping. And then it was arranged for me to meet her. And I went and interviewed her. She, at the time, was based in Orange County, California. And we had a lovely interview. And I started to develop the concept. And then I thought, Gong Li, she is such an exquisite actress, and she would represent this perfectly, and she was just the right age. She had a global audience that would be attracted to the film. So it all made sense, and I put all these ideas together and then presented it to the China Film Group, and they ended up making the movie. So that's how that happened. At the same time, I was very interested in the product, and I arranged for distribution of some of the films coming out of the China Film Group at the Newport Beach International Film Festival. And that was a lovely thing to see, because that's part of what drives me, is cultural exchange and the opportunities opening up doors and seeing these connections happen. So that's how that came to happen.
And do you think such projects are possible at the current time?
I think that anything is possible at any time. It's a question of whose minds get into what room and what their motives are. If the motive is genuine, if the motive is of mutual interest, anything is possible.
And would they contribute to in-depth mutual understanding between nations, such projects?
It certainly can. It depends, of course, on the nature of the project, but the arts, literature, of course, prior to motion pictures, what a beautiful way to communicate concepts and to explain the human condition and to illustrate the fact that there's certain aspects of the human condition that are the same today as they were, 300, 400, 500 years ago. You have to address the matters of the soul, the heart, the emotional needs of the individual, the belief in family and belief in something greater than yourself, the belief in God, whether you happen to be Buddhist or whether you happen to be, from Islam, or whether you happen to be Jewish, or as I was raised Catholic. I've studied Buddhism. I love the philosophies. I talked at length with the bishop who was based in Los Angeles, who I'd known his entire time in Los Angeles, the bishop who had spent his first 10 years in the church at the Vatican. I talked to him at length about these multiple religions and what I learned from it. And he loved the idea that I was studying them. He wasn't standing there saying to me, oh no, you can only read the Catholic writings. No, he loved the fact that I was embracing it. And it's what people have to do. And that's how you start to see the commonality. And you realize that everybody is seeking the same thing. So support it. That's...
Absolutely. So John, you directed and produced projects such as Mongolia Concert and Sudan Music and Dance Festival, capturing living musical traditions on stage and on film. What role do you believe music plays in preserving cultural memory?
I think music is absolutely one of the most superb ways to encapsulate culture and to inspire. The inspiration that I get from music with anything that I do, whether it's cooking, because I love to cook, and that's a creative art form, you know, in the kitchen, I mean, it brings back memories of my mother teaching me, whatever. But music, we've had incredible composers in this country, and, you know, going back to people like Gershwin, the things that he did. Aaron Copland, he captured nature. Exquisitely, he captured nature. There is not a motion picture about the Old West from any composer that isn't influenced by Aaron Copland. And frankly, it was until I heard a beautiful wind symphonic piece written by the very famous jazz composer Wayne Shorter, who wrote for the Imani Wind this magnificent suite. And I heard it live in its premiere in La Jolla, and I told Wayne afterwards, I had not heard anybody capture nature like Aaron Copland could until you. Music is at the core of all of it. When I'm writing, whatever I'm doing in life, but particularly when you talk about the creative arts, when I'm writing, I'm listening to music that is related to whatever it is I'm doing, because it stimulates so much thought. It puts me in a zone. It's fantastic. It blanks out the noise of life, and it brings focus. So that, you know, that's a personal style. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do that to be a writer, but it happens to be the way that I like to approach it. It inspires me tremendously. I'm a musician also, and I have keen appreciation for the disciplines of music and what can be accomplished through that in expressing your, you know, your core. So music is right at the center of it.
Would you say it's universal?
Oh, I have to believe so. Absolutely.
And in your documentary short, Dr. Sylvia Earle, The Oceans and Our Natural Systems, you focus on the importance of the world's oceans and environmental balance. How urgent do you believe the ocean crisis is today?
Oh, I think it is an extreme crisis where the entire world needs to wake up to it. There are a lot of people who don't know what they're doing, what damage they're doing. There are some people who are perhaps lazy and don't want to pay attention to it. And there are others who just kind of shine it on, whatever. But you consider that this globe, this world that we live on, it should really be called Planet Blue because it's massively water. And Dr. Sylvia Earle coined that phrase of Planet Blue, and I love that. Um, her recognition of the dangers, when you consider that that massive body of water that represents so much of the planet, so much of our climate comes from that, and disturbing its quality and everything that it lives within it and everything that gains life from it, it has to be protected. It has to be recognized. And it's not a difficult thing to do for people to realize that every step they take, they can contribute to the benefit of it or the danger of it. You make a choice. And so education becomes hugely important about what that ocean represents and what it means to the global climate.
Absolutely. And what are your thoughts on plastic pollution of the ocean, specifically micro and nanoplastic?
It's an extremely dangerous thing, what is getting into the food systems. I have tremendous concerns about that, and right alongside of that, I have tremendous concerns about what the American culture has become with fast food and preserved foods rather than fresh foods. And what I see people consuming, and then you look at the health problems we have in this country, and you think about the future generations, and you think about the medical practices that have to be employed, and who's going to finance that, and who's going to take care of these people who in their younger years are abusing their bodies by what it is they choose to consume, and what is it that they're consuming? What is it made from? I look at some of these things that are made and sold representing themselves to be one thing, and I wonder, what are they really made out of? And when you look at the pollution that can come from nanoplastics and how that can get into the animal kingdom, it can get into the creatures from the sea, and that ends up being ingested and repeated and transferred, and it ends up becoming part of who we are. This is hugely dangerous. So people need to wake up to all of this and realize that every step you take, you could be contributing to a very ugly future. Or you could be taking a different kind of step, and it doesn't take much for people to start cleaning it up.
Absolutely. And you know, Alatra Scientific Group just released a scientific documentary on micro and nanoplastic called Nanoplastics Threat to Life. And a lot of scientists voiced their concerns about how nanoplastic is this invisible threat that's actually a big danger to humanity, and that is epidemic already today. And it's there is not one area of the earth where we do not find micro and nanoplastic in the air, in the water, in the food, and so on and so forth. It's in our bodies, and it's a very, very dangerous thing that we cannot see, but it's out there that we need to study more. So it's definitely there. Do you think that there's still room for hope?
Oh, there's always room for hope. It's a question of shift the focus and help people understand how simple it is for them to help. So it's a very simple step. And teaching people to be responsible to that. You know, responsibility that was taught to me by my parents and the military school training that I had. These are wonderful things that I reflect on and realize as an adult that it's just part of the core of caring about your family's life, your neighborhood's life, your community's life, your state's life, your country's life, and the world, and realize that what I'm doing here could affect somebody far away or close by, and make choices that are good for everybody. Stop thinking about yourself only. This is one of the things that is really ugly about society when people are dealing with such self-serving motives and they're not looking at the greater good, and they're taken in by convenience, which is very spoiling, and they're not willing to do a little bit of work or take the steps beyond that comfort of the absolute convenience. So There are solutions to it. I love seeing people using glass or aluminum containers for water rather than plastic. The plastic thing is insane. It's gone out of proportion. Yes, plastic is a wonderful and valuable item that needs to be used in an appropriate way, but everything cannot be solved by using plastic. And there's alternates to it while not giving up certain necessities or conveniences about life in the modern world. But you have to realize what every aspect of it means and how it affects the future, how it affects the planet in the moment.
You know, this documentary too that I've mentioned, it talks about how it's not even the plastic that we use, because plastic is a big part of our life. We use plastic for everything we do today. It's the way of the future, we can say. Our phones, our computers, our clothes, everything is made out of plastic. But since the 60s, when plastic started to be mass produced, all of it is still on our planet. None of it has gone away. It just broke down into little micro and nanoplastic particles. And that is what's dangerous to us, is the electrostatic charge on those particles and the plastic that we have today. Even if we clean our beaches, stop using plastic, we still already have enough today to eliminate humanity a few times over. So that's what's, I think, the biggest and the most concerning thing, is that those micro and nanoparticles that go into our bodies, go into the animals, go into the life itself, and the oceans as well, right? It changes the composition of the water. So it's very dangerous today. So hopefully, like you said, hopefully there's hope.
Well, you know, it's a lovely thing, for example, to see a toothbrush that is made from wood. And yes, the fibers are plastic, but the handle doesn't have to be plastic. So it's that kind of thinking that says we can reduce the need for plastic without creating any inconvenience to anyone, without damaging anything, and everybody can continue on with their life. These things can be figured out.
Yes. And John, what has been inspiring you lately? What issues have you been thinking about most in recent months?
I'm very concerned about the youth in this country and having them be prepared for life, having them understand the core values of discipline and devotion to something other than themselves and their desires. The novel I wrote called Taking It Back, which I was very fortunate to have Shaquille O'Neal write a beautiful cover endorsement, and the very famous basketball player Bill Walton also did that. It's a project that I'm right now at the front end of casting, and expect to be making the movie this coming year. This is a story that addresses the at-risk sector of teenagers in this country and focuses on the mentoring that adults who volunteer from police departments all over this country through the National Police Athletics League. 80,000 off-duty officers are giving their time as volunteers to this organization, and they are mentoring 2 million at-risk teens daily. Have you ever heard about that in the media?
No.
No. You hear all the horrible stuff. You don't hear about these wonderful people and what they're doing to help kids. And when you see the dynamics between these officers, the men and women that are giving their time, and you see the response of the kids and how much they love each other and what they're learning, the disciplines of sport. It's a wonderful way to teach discipline. People have dreams. They dream of being the next Steph Curry or the next LeBron James or, whomever. The female side of it, you've got incredible athletes who are just inspiring people like crazy. So all these dreams are happening on basketball courts throughout the country, in the projects, in neighborhoods where, they're very low rent areas. There's a lot of crime on the streets, what have you. But you have these kids who have dreams to the future. Those dreams are what propel them. And this project is very deeply important to me because it can help these kids realize what hard work and devotion, learning to be disciplined, what it can provide to you and bring to you in terms of celebrating your efforts and giving you a step and a bridge to something greater as you start to grow up. It's not all contained in the neighborhood. There's a great big world out there, but you have to prepare yourself for it. And athletics teaches that beautifully, and law enforcement is trying to support that through that organization. So that's one of several subjects that are very, very near and dear to the heart.
What other projects are you currently working on that inspire you?
There's a project that I'm working on that is going to deal with the circumstances in the Middle East and the laundering of money through drug cartels and channeling that through back to dark areas of the Middle East that are trying to attack and stop, the progress. That's a very important project. I'm dealing with some actual history, and I'm dealing with relatively recent events. So I'm very, very eager to move that project forward. Again, it's an opportunity through the characters in the story to have an audience understand that what the people there are facing is no different than what we're facing in this neighborhood, and that mothers and fathers are dealing with children and trying to protect them, but trying to also give them the freedom to experience. And there's a lot of danger in all of that. And trying to get your arms around the dangers that are on the street and get things cleaned up is a very big thing for everybody. Mm-hmm. We're facing it here. The fentanyl issue is horrible. So common human issues.
That's very good. More people need to work on those issues.
I do believe so.
And I think we'll make this world a better place quicker. John, your father, Emile Kuri, had a remarkable career and left a lasting legacy in cinema. What is the most important lesson that he taught you, something you have carried with you throughout your life and your career?
Well, there's a wonderful story I love to tell people because this is all about having the courage to step forward and take the chance. When he first came to Los Angeles, young man, maybe 22 years of age, a member of the Lebanese community offered him a job as a clerk in his furniture store. And it was a furniture store that was probably the best store in the city of Hollywood. And the building still stands at the corner of Western Avenue and Vermont. It was a very popular store. My dad was a clerk. And in those days, late 1920s, 30s, men, didn't matter what your job was, you went to work with a white shirt and a tie. My dad was a clerk. It was noon. All the decorators have left the floor and gone out to lunch. My dad's the only person on the floor. He's dusting. He hears the front door open. He looks and he sees a client come in, very attractive, well-dressed woman, sophisticated, obviously somebody that needs to have attention paid to her. He took the dust rag and folded it and put it in his pocket and walked up to her and said, "May I help you?" 30 minutes later, she is completely enthralled with what he's doing with her. The decorators return, see who he's talking to. They try to intercede. She won't hear of that. She pushes them away. That night, she goes home. My father doesn't know this. She is the wife of the very famous film producer, studio owner, Hal Roach, who did all the Spanky and Our Gang and the Hopalong Cassidys and all of those B movies that played the cinema houses for Saturday matinees. He was a big deal. He's doing a film about Zorro, and he's very upset with the art department. And he tells his wife at dinner about this, and she looks at him and says, "I've got just the guy for you." They call from the studio the next day to the furniture store owned by Mr. Ferris Behenessy, and they want this young man, Emile Kuri, to come to the studio. So my dad went to the studio, solved the problems, worked for a couple of weeks. They got the set done. Hal Roach is very happy. End of story. Dad goes back to the furniture store. 2 months later, same thing happens. This time it's an Art Deco, wonderful romantic comedy. Cary Grant, Constance Bennett. The film was Topper, which became a huge success. Same problem. Hal Roach is unhappy with the Art Deco interior, calls for my dad. He comes and does it, and that launched him. And it started. Why did it start? Because he had the courage to take that desk cloth, put it in his pocket, and walk up, look her in the eyes, and say, "May I help you?"
Courage.
Courage. Yeah.
Have you had any of those examples for yourself where you used that courage and then it made positive impact?
It's happened to me in many different ways throughout my career. Absolutely. I learned from my military school years, I learned to be very respectful of people, to be respectful of authority, to recognize that. I had circumstances where I realized in retrospect that a director who was having a problem with something that I was responsible for actually wasn't having a problem with it, but was using it as a device to buy time because there was something going on within the design of the production that he needed to change. And he needed an excuse to stop production. And I stood on a soundstage and got dressed down, as they would say in the military, for something, which taught me a lesson that was very important for me, but it also, I understood what was going on, and I respectfully listened to the man be quite upset. Well, this same man who so respected my work recommended me many times to many people, and I got many assignments as a result of him respecting the way I dealt with things. So respecting the responsibilities of your job, realizing that you're very capable of making mistakes, and when you make mistakes, own them. And if you need to be corrected, accept that fact, but also understand the pressures under which the people you are working for are living, and try to support them however you have to.
That's a very good point. We never know what people are going through.
Yes.
And you work with scientists, indigenous leaders, artists, athletes, government officials, and young people across the world. Was there ever a conversation with a representative or another culture that truly shifted your worldview or challenged your assumptions? And if so, what stayed with you?
I've had a lot of circumstances where I met with very high authority within governments. I'm talking parliamentary ministers, actually presidents of countries. They've all been tremendous learning experiences because I might walk into a meeting with certain assumptions or what have you, and then walk out having learned something that I didn't realize, or I might spot something that is troubling in the process that explains to me why certain conditions are the way they are. What certainly has become clear to me is that you can find corruption frequently in the halls of power. It's something that exists. It's part of the human condition. It's very easy for people to become through their own actions, victims of their quest for power or authority. And that can be very, very damaging to government and to the people who are governed. Realizing that nothing is perfect, everybody being human is very capable of mistakes and failures. A lot of people are operating under pressures that are beyond our comprehension. They're answering to masters that we don't even know are behind the curtain. So there's one of the greatest things that I've learned throughout all of it is don't make assumptions. And you better have your ears open and you better listen to what's going on. You better keep your eyes open and act always from your core, act for truth, try to do things not because it's self-aggrandizement, but it's for the greater good of whatever the project is that you're attached to, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. The motivation can't be me, and I want more, which so often is what you see. There has to be something much greater than that. That's why I keep talking about the greater good, the fact that there is a greater power, there is something out there. This universe didn't just happen because, there was a hiccup in outer space somewhere. The old theory about a butterfly flutters its wings and then across an ocean there is a monsoon that happens because of this disruption. Well, there's a lot to think about with that because a little disruption somewhere can expand and grow. And you have to pay attention to everything you're doing all the time. I'm a commercially trained pilot. I've done a lot of flying. When you look at the disciplines of flying and you realize the responsibilities of that, of navigating and flying and dealing with weather and whatever, these are tremendous responsibilities, which forces you to think. Think, plan, be prepared. Don't walk into things unprepared. In the most fundamental ways, always be prepared.
You were the one flying the plane.
Wonderful thing to do, to be working. I love pilots. There's a very unique, it's like musicians. I love musicians because musicians are so much fun to hang out with. They have senses of humor that are just phenomenal. The things that happen on stages and behind scenes are just hysterical. But that's part of being these creative minds. They will approach life from unique angles. As a pilot, your life is in your hands. You're flying an aircraft. You've got people on board. Or in the case of doing cinematography, you are very carefully orchestrating. You're thinking about what you're going to do. You're rehearsing it on the ground, talking to the pilots you're working with. And then you go up and you execute it. And it's a beautiful thing to do it with the real aircraft, not use CGI for it, because you spot CGI in a heartbeat, because the young people that are programming that CGI, they probably grew up playing video games and they know the world of aviation because of video games. Well, all that stuff is so false and unreal. When you see this done in motion pictures, you don't believe it. But if you look at a film where somebody actually was flying real planes and you're photographing from one plane to another, you're doing these beautiful things, it's fantastic, and it makes the motion picture real, and then you believe it.
Does it happen now? I feel like now everything is.
Every now and again it happens. It's very, very rare. When I did, I produced a couple of those films that I'm talking about where flying was involved, the Ron Howard pictures, and he turned over these flying sequences to me, and I'm working with these wonderful aerobatic champions, and we're doing wingtip formation flying, and I wanted to get some beautiful movements where you're looking at the earth below, but you're looking at this aircraft in the foreground, and it's very real. And I was working with this international champion, actually, Charlie Hillard, wonderful guy. He taught me a great deal about flight. I'm flying him, which means my eyes are on his plane. We have rehearsed what we're going to do. on the ground talking about it. And all I'm going to do is keep my aircraft however many feet from the wingtip of his aircraft, who has the actor in it, and he's dressed as a double. And we're going to do these maneuvers, and including coming in to a landing where I'm not looking at where I'm going, I'm looking at him. And he's taking me to wherever it is I have to go. That is a question of deep trust and respect in the person that you are working with, which teaches you so much about disciplining your mind, believing in the people you're working with, doing the proper preparation to accomplish that. The end result was beautiful, and the most marvelous part of it, other than the great stories we would tell each other after flying all day in the hot sun, having beers after the flights were over, when John J. O'Connor, who was the New York Times critic, saw the film, he made this distinct comment that the flight sequences were swoopingly beautiful. I've never forgotten the phrase. And he was recognizing me in his line about all of that. And it was a lovely thing because we had worked very hard to accomplish it. And it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful, yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Having lived and worked across so many cultures, disciplines, and generations, if there is one piece of wisdom that you could share with the viewers, what would it be?
One piece of wisdom with respect to cultures and
disciplines and generations.
One piece of wisdom is to have your mind open. Take your prejudices and throw them out the window and approach it. Whatever it is, approach it as if it's the first thing you're going to be learning in your life, and receive the information. If your door is closed, if you approach it with a presumption walking in the door, what are you going to receive? If you walk in and the door is open to receive, this is a beautiful thing because you are going to learn something. And you're going to walk away with a fulfillment of that. So culture to culture can be an absolutely beautiful thing if you approach it with a smile, if you approach it with humanity. I had this most amazing experience in Brazil. I wrote a screenplay, which I hope to see this movie made, that dealt with the slave traffic being brought out of the Congo Delta region. And one of the great ports for that was in the Rio de Janeiro area. Havana, Cuba was the other significant port of entry. And there was a ship named the Conagher that was bringing several hundred slaves into that port to put into the marketplace. That ship was pursued by the Brazilian Navy. The captain of that ship, who was an American, ran the ship aground because he knew that this big naval vessel from the Brazilian Navy could not come into those waters. And the slaves that jumped overboard were captured and put to work on a plantation. Well, jump forward 80 years or whatever it was, when the plantation owner died, he gave the plantation to the slaves, which was a beautiful thing. I went there and I met the descendants and talked to them about their ancestors. And the experience was so beautiful to sit with these people in their simple homes, to have them make coffee or whatever and sit and talk, and just like you and I are talking right now. It's so beautiful to embrace other cultures and the exchange of information and what you learn as a result of it, touching humanity. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And you think about the depth of all of that, ancestors of slaves, and their connection back to their homeland, in all that they represent, it is really it's a beautiful thing about life that we have the possibility of meeting these other cultures and finding out something that we would otherwise never, ever, ever experience.
John, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. Thank you so much for sharing your stories about your dad, stories about your life. I think many times today you mentioned the word humanity. And I think that is what we need more of. And we really, truly hope that, in the near future, we're going to have a united humanity.
I absolutely am with you on that. Absolutely. And thank you so much for talking to me. I greatly appreciate that.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.